Hi, I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Redefining Midlife podcast, a podcast designed for the 40-plus woman who is determined to challenge society's myths and beliefs around midlife. It's for the woman who is inspired and ready to define midlife her way. Join me each week as I chat to health and wellness experts for up-to-date information on how to live well, as well as some special conversations with incredible everyday women redefining what midlife can look like. Here's to making our next half of life even better than the first. Today, you'll meet the incredible Kirsten Smith. Kirsten lives in Brisbane, Australia with her husband, Scott. She's a mum to 2 adult children and her Insta-famous rescue dog, Percy. And she's also the founder of award-winning natural skincare brand, Bettyquette. It's a brand that I can recommend firsthand, and you'll be able to find all of the links to Kirsten and her skincare range, Bettyquette, in the show notes. Now, as you'll soon hear, Kirsten is a firm believer that no matter what comes our way, we should always be looking for the silver linings. For Kirsten, this isn't just a throwaway, feel-good line. Because regardless of what she's had to face in the last few years, looking for those silver linings has become a way of thinking, living, and being. And during our chat, Kirsten speaks openly and candidly about the year her world would be forever changed. In 2015, she began to lose her eyesight, and she was diagnosed with a rare condition, IIH, which is short for Idiopathic Intracranial Hypertension. Now, this is a rare condition that only affects 1 in 100,000 women. I don't want to give too much away now, but during our conversation, Kirsten shares how she was diagnosed, the aggressive treatment that was required, and the toll that it had on her body. Now, incredibly, all of this led to the creation of her business, Bettyquette. It's a classic example of one of Kirsten's silver linings. I'm sure, like me, you're going to be inspired and uplifted by this chat today. So without further ado, let's start. Welcome, Kirsten, to the Redefining Midlife podcast. It's lovely to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Kirsten, we'll start the conversation with regards to what life was like for younger Kirsten. So if you can tell us about your late teens and early 20s, what did you imagine your future was going to be like then?
Well, growing up, my dream was to become a teacher. That's all I ever wanted to be. And so that's what I became. I went to uni in my 20s and studied early childhood and became an early childhood teacher and just honestly lived a very, in quotation marks, normal suburban life. I met my husband during my uni years. We got married. We had 2 kids. I was just living a normal everyday life, working on my career, raising a family. That was sort of my 20s and 30s, really, and pretty much what I wanted from a young age.
Yeah, right. So you were living, basically, she said, living the dream.
I think so. I mean, it's a hard dream to balance it all.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just felt like it was just a very normal, happy suburban life.
And did you always teach in Brisbane? Because I'm also a teacher, so we've got that in common. So was your teaching career always in a larger centre, or did you do some more remote travelling?
No, it was always in Brisbane. I grew up in New Zealand, but we moved here when I was 15. So I did the last couple of years of school here and then went to uni here, and then actually got my first job as director of a childcare centre. So I worked in childcare for a couple of years and then moved to a couple of kindies and then a private school. So always in the Brisbane area.
Yeah, gotcha. And did you ever want to move with that, or because you established your family and no doubt your home in Brisbane, you wanted to stay there?
Yeah, I always wanted to stay. We moved a lot as a kid, so it was just important for me to stay put. And then when I had my own children, I didn't want to move them around as much as I did as a kid.
Yes. And so how long were you teaching for, and what made you change and a shift away from that area?
So all up, I taught for about 15 years and I absolutely loved it, and I still actually miss it. But when my own children became school age, I just found it really hard to balance being a mum and being a teacher. And I was spending more time with other people's children than my own. And my husband was traveling a lot at the time for work. So it was very difficult. And we just got to the point where I tried part-time work for a while as well, but just the balance just wasn't there. So it got to the point, I think my youngest was about 3, and we just decided that we'd see how we would go with me just being a full-time mum for a few years.
Yeah. And so that worked well, obviously.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it comes with its challenges financially and that kind of thing, but it just was the right move for us at the time. And, you know, I think when you put yourself in certain situations, you just make it work.
Yeah. Do you often look back in those years? Because I know I do, and I go, how on earth did I manage to fit everything in?
Yes.
You just sometimes wonder how it all happened.
Yes, it's a bit of a blur and a whirlwind. And like our kids are now 21 and almost 18. So it was a long time ago now, but I look back at it and I'm like, wow, as women, we're pretty amazing, aren't we? We can actually do more than we give ourselves credit for.
The days are packed. From the moment you wake up, you're on a schedule. When you've got,
yes,
it happens when you don't have children as well, but more so when you've got children. I've only got 2 as well, and mine are just slightly older than your children. My children are 23 and 21. And, you know, when I was working full time, it was, and we didn't live in a town, we lived out of town. So it was quickly getting ready. And before school, you're there much earlier because you have to prepare the day for everybody else's children. And now, you know, the poor kids were going from pillar to post. It was a lot. And then you've got everything in the weekends, all of the filling, all of the events that you have to fill in, and then all of the work that you've got after school. Yeah, it's big. So I can see why you would have chosen that path and what led you down, because I'm sure as you've discovered, teaching is an all or nothing profession. You've got to give it your all. And yeah, and you don't feel right as a teacher if you can't give your all.
That is absolutely true. Yes, you've nailed it.
Yeah, and your youngest has now left school, is that right?
Yeah, she just graduated. So she's off to uni herself next year. She's actually going to the same uni I went to. So that's a nice full circle moment. Yeah.
Brilliant. Has she chosen what she would like to study yet?
Yes, she's doing a Bachelor of Music. So she wants to be a songwriter. So that's her goal. Very creative.
Isn't that fabulous?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well done to her. So you decided to become a fashion and lifestyle blogger. I'm assuming, is that when you were at home, Kirsten, or did that happen earlier? Okay, tell us about that.
Yes. Well, that sort of happened a bit by accident. I actually became a little bit bored being at home. I know it sounds silly because that's what we wanted for our family, but I don't know. I sort of was a bit bored and needed a outlet. So I just started a blog. I didn't tell anyone about it. I just sort of wrote for me, and I would, at the time, because the kids were little, I'd write sort of funny random stories about things that, you know, they'd done. And I also loved planning birthday parties. So I'd share a lot of that kind of thing. And the first birthday party I shared was our daughter's birthday, and it went viral. It got picked up by a big US website. It went viral. And so I sort of, the blog just then kind of grew that way. This was a long time ago now, probably a good 10 years ago, when it was quite easy on social media to get things to blow up. Now it's virtually impossible. And it was never a strategy of mine. It all just happened by accident. And so then I entered into the very early years of blogging where brands were just starting to work with people. And I eventually began working with brands and helping promote their products through the blog. And that sort of morphed into becoming a fashion and lifestyle blogger.
Wow. And your own website for that, or do you submit pieces for the brands that you're working for? I don't know how it works.
I had my own website, so my own blog. It's kirstenandco.com. It's still there floating around on the internet, but I haven't written on it for a couple of years. But yeah, I just would write. I sort of worked with a wide range of brands, and I would go to blogging conferences and they would all say, niche down, you know, get a niche, niche right down. And I just always struggled with that because it was just, I was writing about my life. So it's a bit of a random mishmash of everything, because I just thought, how do you niche down your life? I just sort of shared everything I was interested in and everything I thought other people would be interested in too. So definitely covered a wide range of topics. And fashion and lifestyle is sort of the overarching theme, I guess.
Right. And so that side of your life or the business at that point in time, is that still something that you're doing with a lot of promotion?
I do. So I have an Instagram. I have two Instagram accounts. The first one is Kirsten and Co. And I started that when Instagram first started. And so, yes, I do still work with some brands, but I've just sort of, life is quite hectic. So I don't do as much of that as I used to. But on my Kirsten and Co. Insta is where you'll see like all the fashion and beauty and that kind of thing come through. And I just share. I continue to share like my real life stories now, but actually on stories rather than writing it on a blog. So it's a little bit easier now. Everything is just so straight away, so instant, rather than back in the blogging days, it would take you a couple of hours to write a blog post and then push it out on social media. Now it's just in 30 seconds, you can tell people what you're thinking.
And what do you prefer? Having experienced both, what's your preference?
I mean, you've just got to evolve with it. So back in the day, I loved writing. I loved the creative process. It taught me so much about myself. I didn't know that I could write, even though I used to teach children to read and write. I didn't know that I could actually write like that, write myself. So that's been a really lovely hobby, I guess. And back in the early days, it really was more of a hobby than it was a business. And it was a great creative outlet. But now I love the instant connection that's evolved over time. And I like to just keep things real, and you sort of have control over how people, how you can get your story out there, which I love as well.
It's interesting because I'm only very new to all of this side of things as well, but the connections that you can start making with people are pretty special. Have you had people who were with you from the very beginning when you first started to now? Have you noticed that, or a completely different audience altogether?
No, I absolutely have. And it blows my mind. And I've become friends with people on the internet, you know, and it's, as I've gone through a lot of different things over the years, I find I've had more support from people that I've never actually met than people in my life that know me really well. So it's a beautiful community if it's all used in the right way. You know, you can nurture a really lovely community of like-minded women that we all just sort of look out for each other.
Yeah, I've found that as well. I'm sure there is and you hear about the horrible dark side of and the nastiness, but thankfully, touch wood, I haven't experienced any of that yet, and it's been nothing but support that I've received. So, like you, it's pretty special, and for them to go on that journey with you, and as you said, some support that you've had during some of the harder times, which we'll talk about now, and with your permission. So, Kirsten has very gratefully accepted that we can chat about this part of her life. So, Kirsten, in 2015, life changed dramatically for you. Could you share with the listeners what happened during that time?
Sure. So I started having a really random health things happen to me, just things that would just make me think something's not quite right here. So it started off, I've always been a very headachy sort of a person, but I was getting migraines constantly. My balance was off. I would sort of, when I got out of the car, I would topple a bit. When I was getting dressed in the morning, particularly down my left side, I would sort of struggle to stay upright. And we kind of made a joke, you know, my husband would go, "Oh, you know, have you been on the vodkas at 6 a.m. again?" Just silly, you know, because we're just being ridiculous. And I was like, and at first I was like, "Oh yeah, this is a bit weird." But then it got to the point where I had facial numbness all down the left side of my face, just would randomly come and go. I couldn't feel my face. And then it got to a point where wherever I would stand up, I started losing my eyesight in my left eye. So that happened 3 times. I stood up, I would stand up, and all vision would go in my left eye. It was completely black. And it would stay like that for not very long, just a few seconds. But when you're waiting for your eyesight to come back, a few seconds just feels like eternity. So individually, none of those things were particularly massive until my eyesight started to go. I was losing my eyesight basically. And the first time it happened, I was like, "Well, it's a bit weird." And then it happened the second time. And then the third time I was like, "Okay, something's not right. I've got to go do something about this." So I went to my GP and got a referral to an ophthalmologist, an eye specialist. And he just did a pretty standard eye checkup because I am short-sighted, but I had laser corrective surgery about 20 years ago. So, and they said at the time, eventually that will wear off and you might need it again. So I just thought it's wearing off and something weird's going on. I wasn't too concerned. And then right at the end of the appointment, he said, "I'll just look at the back of your eyes." And he looked at the back of my eyes and he said, "Oh, you need to sit down." And I thought, oh, it's never good when they tell you to sit down. And he said, "You've got really swollen optic nerves. It's something we don't see very often. It's either MS, a brain tumor, or this condition called Idiopathic Intracranial Hypertension, IIH for short. And so I obviously knew what the first two were, and I didn't know what that third one was. And I said to him, "What is that?" And then he said to me, "Well, have you gained a lot of weight recently?" And I was like, that is so rude. Like, no, well, why are you asking me that question? Like, rude. No man, nobody should ever ask a woman about their weight, right? And so I just said, and I have always struggled with my weight. I was significantly heavier then than I am now, about 25 kilos heavier. And I just said to him, I was quite proud of myself. I said, well, I've actually lost a few kilos. And he said, oh, well, IIH is something that we see in typically overweight women. We don't know what the connection is, but you need an MRI and a lumbar puncture urgently to confirm your diagnosis.
Oh, wow.
So
were you by yourself at this consult?
Well, my husband was actually with me because they said, bring someone with you in case we have to put the dye in your eyes.
Yeah.
So he was out waiting in the waiting room and obviously had no idea. And we went into this not overly concerned. And so the ophthalmologist said to me, I need to run some more tests on you. Go and wait in the waiting room and I'll call you back in. So I walked out and my husband was like playing a game on his phone or something. And he barely even looked up because we weren't worried. And I sat down and he said, how'd you go? And I said, well, they said the word brain tumor. And he's like looking at me like, what? And I said, an MS. And I said, and something that fat people get. and he said, bless him, he looked at me and he said, well, you obviously don't have the last one.
Oh, damn. There's a kid.
I know, he actually is. And I said to him, well, I'm kind of hoping that's what it is because it sounds like the best of a really bad lot. So long story short, I had a lumbar puncture, which they do that to measure the fluid in your body. So I have IIH. The diagnosis was confirmed after the lumbar and MRI. So when they do the lumbar puncture, they actually drain the excess fluid that's in your body. And they said to me at the time, a normal reading that's a high is 15 and yours is 32. So I had more than twice as much fluid in my body than I should have. And that is what causes it. So all of that excess fluid sits around your brain and has nowhere to go. So it puts pressure on your optic nerves. My eyes were actually starting to kind of, there's a technical term for it, but they were starting to sort of like pop out of my head a bit because the pressure was so intense. And so, yeah, that's my life just changed dramatically because we were now, if it's left untreated, you lose your eyesight forever. There's no coming back from it.
So is it something that's an ongoing condition that you need to monitor and be aware of, or is it because you've had treatment now you're cured or in a long-term remission? What is it like?
It's always lurking there in the background, and you do have to, like, I'll know when the symptoms come back. And so it's something I will always have, but I've got it under control now. It took me 5 years to get to this point. And I'm off all my medication now. But if any of those symptoms come back, then yeah, it's just straight back to the ophthalmologist for another checkup.
What a terrifying time for you.
Yeah, it wasn't great, not gonna lie. It was
oh, you'd be picking yourself off the floor and trying to dust yourself off, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah, very much.
Wouldn't you? I'm asking you. Yes. Wouldn't you, Kirsten? You'd be doing that. Wow. And so what was the treatment? What did you have to go through?
Treatment was the worst part of it all because the IIH, even though I had symptoms, I wasn't sick with it. So I just looked like me, you know, and I wasn't unwell. And so I had to see every 6 weeks for 3 or 4 years. I saw a neurologist, an ophthalmologist, and an endocrinologist, and together we all worked to get this into remission. So the neurologist was the one who put me on all the medication, and in the first meeting I had with him, he said to me, this will be the worst medication you'll ever be on in your entire life. It's something it's called Diamox, and he explained to me they give it quite often to people who have altitude sickness, and he said he'll give them like half a tablet and it just knocks them flat. And he said, you're going to be on 8 tablets a day. You're going to have to set alarms on your phone to take them every 3 hours, and it will just turn you into a zombie. You will not be able to function. So this was on a Friday. He said, have one last good weekend of being yourself and then get ready. So, I said to him at the time, how long will I have to be on this? And he said, look, probably 6 months. So I was like, I can do 6 months. I can do this. I've got this. And it took me 5 years. So it was, it was an awful time in our life. It changed our life forever. Well, not forever, but at the time, because when I took those first round of tablets, he wasn't kidding. I just slept all day. I felt nauseous constantly. I had to have weekly blood tests to make sure my liver and kidney weren't shutting down, basically. And life just changed for that period of time. We joke now that 2015 was year of the couch, because that's where I lived. I just lived on the couch, and just all I could do was take the kids to school, come home, sleep, wake up when my alarms were set for more medication, go back, do the school run, come home, sleep. That was it.
Wow, what a hideous time for you.
Yeah, it was really, really bad. And I at the time you just get through it the best way you know how. But I look back now and I'm like, this is incredible that we got through that the way we did.
Yes. Did you have anyone help care for you? Because obviously, I mean, you needed some care as well, or were you still busy holding the fort for everybody else like a lot of mums do?
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of support. I think something that I've learned through all of this is when you're faced with something I sort of say it's life altering, because you do have to learn to deal with big life changes. But I think a lot of us, particularly, I'm 49 now, and in our 40s, I feel like as women, we're often faced with something quite life altering, whether it's a medical thing or maybe a marriage breakdown or even just the loss of a friendship. And I think I say to people now, people in your life, when you go through something big, they either step up or they step away. And it really taught me who was in my life for myself and my family. And a lot of people stepped away. It was just too much for them. And I didn't understand what I had either. It was something no one had really ever heard of. 1 in 100,000 women are diagnosed with this in Australia every year, so it's very rare.
Oh gosh,
not many of us with it. And so it was hard to explain to people. And then I was so sick that I just didn't have the energy to explain what was wrong. And so I kind of just withdrew from life. And the blog was actually my outlet. So I actually gave myself a little goal to write every day for that first year on the blog, because it was just something that kept my brain going.
Yeah.
And so I started just sharing my story on the blog, and that gained a lot of traction as well. People became very invested in, are you going to be okay type scenario. So that sort of comes back to when I said earlier, I've had so much love and support from the online community. And so that really helped me get through a really hard time.
Oh, how brilliant you had that support, even though you couldn't see them physically. You knew that, the emotional side of things and the energy side of things would have been helpful for you as well.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
It's sad, isn't it? When things like that happen, when you have true tests of certain friendships, of people that you think are going to be there for you and then aren't. It is something that can be quite shocking, and you've got to process through. So you would have been dealing with your illness, making sure you're okay, the family's okay, and then dealing with all of that as well. Tough time.
Very much so. And
Tough time.
I was the life up until when I was sick. I was the life of the party. I was the one that was the popping the champagne bottles and slicing the cake, and we and then all of that stopped. I had weight to lose. I was told that weight loss could speed up the process of getting better.
Yes.
So I had a lot of weight to lose, and I had no energy. I had no appetite, all because of the medication I was on. So I really changed as a person. And I just would tell everyone I'm really boring now. And I was, and I just wasn't well enough to go anywhere or socialize with anyone. So over time, some friendships and relationships with other family members just kind of fell by the wayside, because I just wasn't the person that I used to be.
No, and it is, I suppose, with any change or shifts in relationships, it's not always you. It might be how people are dealing with a new version of you, and that's
exactly
they have to deal with. But you do take it personally. It's not, and I no doubt that would have been a lot of processing for you. And you're saying you had to lose weight. How hard that must have been for you, because you had no energy. You couldn't move like you wanted to help you lose the weight and stay healthy that way either. Yeah. Challenging
Yeah,
time.
I mean, about the only benefit to all the medication was that it really affected my appetite. So that's, I say I'm a big believer in silver linings. And so it was hideous to be so sick, but the lack of appetite and the constant nausea definitely helped with the weight loss.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you can see the and laugh now, but it must have been
Yeah,
incredibly difficult for you.
yeah.
So can you tell us a story around how your business was created? Because that was in part due to your illness, and that in itself is another incredible story. So you had that, you had your illness, you had some pretty awful symptoms, which, I'll let you explain now what had happened.
Sure. So one of the side effects from being on all that medication was it really it's dehydrates you, because it's basically to try and get rid of all the excess fluid that's in your body. And I've always been a beauty and skincare junkie. I've really loved that. But I also, when I was really sick, had no energy to put into looking after myself. That the only thing that I would do every night is just do a really nice skincare regime that was just sort of 5 or 10 minutes just for myself. And I've always used face oils. My skin has always loved them. And one night I was using a face oil. My husband is a product formulator and blender. That's his career, if you will, but in a completely different industry, in the chemical industry. And he would often look at my beauty products and say, oh, I've got that ingredient at work, we've got that one, I could probably make that. And I was putting this face oil on one night when I was really unwell, and it had a really strong smell. It was making me feel a bit unwell. It was a weird color. And I just said to him, could you make me a face oil that doesn't stink like this one does? And he was like, sure. And I mean, he's had this job for 20 plus years. I've never once asked him to make anything. It just had never clicked. And so I don't know why, I just asked him, and I just said, could you make me a face oil? And he goes, well, I can make you a natural one if you like. And I was like, that would be great, because I was putting so much into my body to get better. I thought, I really need to look after myself on the outside, so let's do a all natural face oil. So he made me one, and he actually made 3 different blends. On the 3rd blend, I was like, you've nailed it. This is amazing. It's hydrating. It's sinking in. It's not greasy. I love it. So I just started using it. This was never meant to be a product developed for a business. It was just for me. And as I said, I had, a bit of a following on the blog and on social media as well. And over time, and probably a good 3 to 6 months, people just started messaging saying, you're looking better. Your skin's looking really nice. What are you using on your skin? And I'd just say, oh, it's just a product Scott made for me. And then it wasn't until I was actually in a store and a complete stranger came up to me and said, I hope you don't mind me asking, what do you use on your skin? It's glowing. And I said, well, it's a face oil that my husband made for me. And she said, could he make me a whole vat of it, and could I dip my head in it? And that made me laugh. And because laughter is my go-to, it's just, I like to make people laugh. I like to tell funny stories. And she just cracked me up in what was a very dark time in my life. Laughter was not really very prominent. And it was at that moment I thought, oh my God, I think we've made something that could help other women. So I went home and I said to her, well, he probably could actually. I'd never thought about that. So I went home and I just said to Scott, I think you might have made something here where there's people are asking me what the product is. Can we make it? And I think for the first time, this was about 2 years into my illness, and he said yes. And I look back now and I've had this conversation with him. He really just said yes because he could see a spark in me that hadn't been there for a very long time. And he, I think, thought this would be a great distraction for you. And so he agreed, knowing that I probably wasn't well enough to take any of this on. But he was right. It was a great distraction. And so we just launched into, I sort of did everything. I built the website, sourced all the bottles, and we launched with 2 face oils.
And went
straight into it, as I always do. Like, nothing's going to stop me. I'm like, let's just go for it. But I honestly thought this will just be a little hobby. This will just be, because I was still going to 6 weekly appointments. So I was still getting bad news at every appointment. Like my mind headspace was not overly great. I wasn't in a great place. But this was something that I could think about other than medical type scenarios. So sort of to give you the condensed version from that, having that conversation, it was about 6 months later, and we launched, and we had just such amazing support from the online community, and we sold 200 bottles in like 48 hours. Wow. We sold out. We ran out of boxes. We ran out of everything. We just were overwhelmed. For every order that I was packing, 2 more were coming in. It was crazy. So that's how it started, completely by accident. And now 5 years later, we've grown from 2 products to, I think we've got about 10 different products now.
That's fabulous. And the name, again, another great story is the naming of your product. So I'd love you to tell everybody about that as well. So it's called Bettyquette. So if you could explain where that name comes from.
So here's another twist. We actually launched with a completely different name. And I had no idea at the time about trademarks. And we went to trademark 2 of our face oils. And that's when we discovered that the name of our business could actually be implicated down, like trademark wise. So we had to change the name when we were about 18 months in, which was very stressful. And we sought the advice of an IP lawyer, and he said, you have to come up with a word that doesn't exist. That's the only way you'll get anything trademarked, because everything to do with skin and skincare is gone, basically. Yep. It's taken. So he said, just come up with a word. Okay, well, my grandma's name is Betty, and she was a very strong influence in my life. I think a lot of us have amazing relationships with our grandparents. It's just different to your own parents because the love there is just so different, and there's no rules or boundaries with your grandparents. You know, they'll love you no matter what you do in your life. And grandma and I were very, very close, and I thought I'd love to get her name in there somewhere. And she sort of also represents our customer. So I actually Googled Betty, like the meaning of Betty, and up came this Urban Dictionary 2020 version of what a Betty is. And it was, she's a triple threat, she's a go-getter, she's strong, and I was like, that's our customer, that's who we're selling to. And as women, that's who we all want to be and who most of us actually are. So I was like, I need to get her name in there somewhere. And so I just was in bed one night just running through words and putting Betty in front of it. And then I was like, etiquette, Bettyquette. And then, because at the time I would handwrite, I don't now because the business has grown a bit too much to do this, but at the time I would handwrite thank you notes in every order, and the etiquette of looking after your customer was really important to me. And I was like, Bettyquette, this just makes so much sense to me. And so we lodged it and we got approved, and then Bettyquette was launched. So bit of a tribute to my grandma, but also keeping our customers in mind.
Yes.
And it's a word that didn't exist.
So what year was this happening? So 2015 you were diagnosed, and then...
Yeah, we launched in 2017. So this was about halfway through 2018, but we didn't do the whole rebranding until 2019 because the IP process takes so long. It took about nearly a year to get approved. It's a long, long time. And I didn't say anything during that year in case it didn't get approved and we had to go back to square one and start again.
Yes.
But then when we launched the new name, the support again was just so overwhelming. Everybody was like, oh, I love it. And it's probably been, again, another silver lining. If we'd stuck to the original name, I just don't think it would have been as great as this new name is.
Yes. And you stock in not only from a warehouse situation for yourself, you've got your website. Do you sell your products anywhere else?
We do have a couple of stockists. We've got some here in salons and boutiques in Brisbane, and we have some online shops that stock our products. And we've just got our first stockist in New Zealand, funnily enough, in Christchurch, where I grew up. And I actually went and visited her a couple of months ago. So that was a bit of a full circle moment because she's in a beautiful boutique in a suburb in Christchurch called Maryvale. And people know Christchurch, they'll know Maryvale's a beautiful, beautiful place to be. So that was a full circle moment.
Oh,
for
congratulations. Sure. That's an incredible story, and incredible to how you're growing it. And given that you've also had those COVID years, trying to do all of this in the middle of probably sourcing your ingredients, sourcing the packaging, I can imagine it wouldn't have been an easy time.
No, it wasn't. Although COVID was good to us because self-care was such a thing, when we were all in lockdown.
Yeah.
So COVID was good to us. And now it's a little bit trickier now that we're all back out in the real world and spending our money on different things. But this is just my life now. Who would have ever thought that I'd be having conversations about sales and wholesalers? And
how amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Oh, you never know. And that's the best part of life, isn't it? That it's always a mystery. You never know what's around the corner for you. With your products, some of them have won Australian awards now. So
yes,
it's not as though you are just, you've your husband obviously is onto something, because the products are beautiful, and I have used some of them myself. In fact, I've got your body oil and the night oil as well for my face. Beautiful. So did you ever imagine that Bettyquette would be as successful as it is today? So tell us about the awards, and also, did you dream of the success that it would be having?
Right, so Lemon Drop is our hand, nail and cuticle oil, and that has won best product for hands and nails, which just blows my mind, because I always joke, I'm not a sporty person, so I've never won a trophy in my life. I don't have any sort of certificates or anything like that. And so when it won an award, I was like, this is just so great. But I still don't have a trophy. You just now, because everything's digital, you get a little digital badge. So that side of things is a bit disappointing. But, I never dreamt. I mean, honestly, as I said earlier, I launched this purely as a hobby, and it just grew much quicker than we anticipated. And I never thought, we launched with 2 face oils. I never thought we'd have body oils and hand oils and hair. And I just never thought that this would be the way out of such a terrible illness, to be honest with you.
Oh, it is amazing. So there's your silver lining there, isn't it? In that it's created something for you, a business for you. Is your husband, is he still doing what he used to do, or is he full now?
Yes.
Full time? Oh, so he's doing both.
Yeah, he's a very busy man. So he has his full-time job, and then and he still develops all the products for me. I just say to him, this is what I'd like, and can you make this? And together we do research and development and come up with new products. But so it's keeping us both really busy.
And do you have somewhere where you put? I don't know the terminology, so you're going to have to help me. Here.
No, that's okay.
So you would have been first initially at home, where he was making and blending some of these things.
Yeah.
Where do you do that all now?
So he's got a little lab that he works out of. Okay. And then all of our products, I used to pack all the orders myself, but that just took it was just taking up all day long. So we now have a 3PL, third party logistics warehouse, and that's been a total game changer for our business. Yeah, so all of the orders go through them, which is great. And I still see all the orders coming in, and I still now, 5 years later, get excited when I see names that are from the very first. I know who ordered on the first day, and I see the names. I'm like, oh gosh, they're still ordering. That's amazing, So it's still got that nice small family feel about it, for sure.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful. And what are your dreams then because things have happened so quickly? Have you had time to think, oh, I'd really love to send my business and see it expand even further, because you've gone into New Zealand now? Yeah, thanks for sharing that news, because that's exciting. Are you hoping more of that sort of thing to happen?
It's an interesting question, because now that I'm actually completely in remission, like I'm at peak health now, touch wood, I've got to touch wood, because
touching it for you.
Actually, in the last probably 6 months, I have really been reassessing what I want to do with the rest of my life, basically, because our kids are now adults, and it's just kind of the two of us. Our daughter still lives at home, but she'll be off to uni next year. And so initially I had really big goals for the business and wanted it to be stocked in all sorts of different places. But now I'm just like, I don't know if I want that level of stress in my life. I actually am more focused on keeping it small and keeping it just how it is now, that's manageable. I don't particularly want to spend my 50s, 60s and 70s managing a huge team of staff and all the stress that comes with that. So we've sort of made a conscious decision to keep it small, so that we've got time to be together outside of the business as a couple.
Yeah.
And so travel is a really big goal for us. And just having a bit of fun, because I feel like in the last 5 to 7 years, we haven't had a lot of fun. And I think COVID probably helped with that too, because it's made it so normal now for everybody to work at home. There's, businesses aren't scaling up like they used to.
Yes.
It's more about staying the same or even scaling back a bit, and just really putting yourself first. So that is actually probably my dream and goal.
Well, that's great, because I was going to say, well, what's something that you would love to do in the next 10 to 20 years? So obviously travel, you mentioned that, and just having fun. So what do you see, like, where do you want to go, and what sort of fun things do you want to start adding to your life?
Well, we've booked a big trip for next year, which is a bucket list for me. I'm a bit Queen obsessed, royal obsessed. So we're going to Buckingham Palace. Not going to the palace, just to the gates.
Yeah.
They're not going to let me in. But so we're going to London next year, which will be amazing. And then I'm not really sure. We're just kind of taking it as it comes. I think I'm a massive planner. I think that's the teacher in us, isn't it? We love to be organised and rigid, and I'm kind of just taking that pressure off myself a bit now and just relaxing and easing into life a bit more. It's more like, if we see some sort of great travel deal come up, we might go there. We'll just wait and see what comes up.
Yeah, that's fabulous. And I think sometimes, well, not sometimes, I know we're talking to my friends who have had big wake-up calls, some really life-changing things happening. That's the approach to take, because life is too short. You could, as you said, you could spend all that time obsessing about getting into this market and getting into that market, and you just miss so much otherwise. And I'm glad you've said that.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's different, aren't they?
Oh, they are. But it is important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and that approach might change, but for now, that's the approach I'm going to take. Yeah.
Good on you. I'm really pleased to hear that. So what's your biggest positive that you've had since entering this time of life? Because, we're now middle of life. So what are you seeing as a big takeaway and positive?
Well, a big positive, we've actually just downsized our house. So we sold our house and we've downsized into something significantly smaller. And that was a deliberate move. And from there, I've just got so much more time now. And the mental load has lifted, because, when you're in those school years, you're just thinking constantly about, okay, where do they need to be next? What thing have they got on? What parent-teacher conference do I need to be at? And even my daughter only graduated 2 weeks ago, but already I can see the mental load has gone. And so now I'm kind of thinking, I've got all this time that I can dedicate to myself now for the first time in my entire life. And I know I've had conversations online with other women about this. I think it's a thing that we all go through, and a big evaluation of what do we want to do. So time is definitely a great positive, and I just need to work out now what to actually do with that time.
Yeah, I know. And for some women, it is incredibly confronting and scary. For others, they see it as a huge adventure, and then there's all the people in between. So, and you can slide from one to the other fairly quickly. As well.
Yes,
I think
that's me. I'm definitely swinging in between. Wow, this is amazing. To oh my God, this is so overwhelming. Life's changing as I know it.
Yes, but you can be anything that you want to be and do anything that you want to do. There's so many new things that are open, and that's exciting, I think. I'm a glass half full person, so that's probably why I see it as being exciting.
Yes.
Yeah.
I see it the same way. That's
Excellent.
it.
Now, you were mentioning before that you're in remission and you're feeling great. So what sort of things are you doing to support your health and wellness to keep you in your peak condition?
So that's changed a lot for me, because I used to be a self-confessed exercise avoider, and I just really don't enjoy exercise at all. I just do it because I have to. But a couple of years ago, we got a rescue dog, Percy, and he's a beautiful golden retriever, and he needs a walk every day.
Yes. Yep.
He is. He's a bit Insta famous. Everybody loves Percy on Instagram. But he's just such a beautiful dog, and he needs a walk every day. So that got me moving again, which is great. And I really now commit to doing some sort of physical exercise for 30 to 40 minutes a day. Nothing, back in the old days, I used to just go hard at everything, all or nothing. And I would never last with anything. And now I've realized, as I've got older and I've got better, it's nicer to just do something gentle that is looking after your mind and your body.
Yep.
So I'm definitely more focused on being sort of a healthier version of me, which people who followed me right from the start quite often will send messages saying, who even are you? Because I mean, I used
Kirsten.
I used to have a phone cover that had some slogan on it, like eat cake for breakfast or something. Like and I used to joke that I was allergic to exercise because it made me sweat, and so I've definitely changed a lot. But I think as you get older, you realize that you've got to do what you can to be the healthiest version of you, and not worry about what anyone else is doing. Just do what works for you.
And managing stress would have to be fairly important as well. So those sort of forms of exercise
are great because they do keep your
Yep.
stress levels down naturally lower. What else might
Yes.
you do to reduce stress in your life? Is there anything that you've got practice that you do, or is there something that you're aiming to do in the future?
I think I've just become a lot calmer as a human being, and a lot, I think age does that to you as well. So I used to get very sort of wound up if things weren't going completely perfect. And now this illness has taught me, like, just be grateful to be here, and done is better than perfect. So I'm a lot calmer just in my life approach to things. Not that I was particularly, not wound up as such, but I sometimes I liken myself to a duck. I look very calm on the outside, but inside my legs are just going at a million. My insides are going like a duck underwater. And I'm not really like that anymore. I just try to focus on just being in the now and not worrying too much about things that may or may not happen. And I find that really helps. But don't get me wrong, I still have days where I'm just internally a bit of an anxious mess.
No, you're human. So we know we have to have those times. That's a given, isn't it? That all of us will have those days.
Yeah, that's right.
And does any hormonal shifts and things, will that affect your illness? Can that cause something?
Not that I'm aware of. No, but yeah, I'm 49, so obviously I'm entering into all those fabulous changes now. And I think that's also really my products really help there, because obviously they're for dry skin. And then when I launched the business, I had no idea at the time so many women suffer from dry skin. And now with hormonal changes and everything, it's also really changed the way that I market things and that kind of thing, because I feel like for those of us sort of 45 and over, we're just a lost market. We're just,
agree.
We're very knowledgeable about what we want, and we've got a bit of excess money to spend as we get a bit older. And I don't take that whole anti-aging approach. I'm very pro-aging, pro being proud of how old you are and just embracing who you are as a person.
Yes. Yeah, that's good. I love that message as well. And that's probably why I'm attracted to your products, because that's exactly what they offer.
Yeah, I don't like it when we're targeted to get rid of our fine lines. And I'm like, what's wrong with having fine lines?
I don't want anything to take them.
That's right. That's right.
I've called my two lines in between here my children. By name.
I love it.
And I earned that badge.
That's it.
So, Kirsten, if you could give the 40 plus woman some advice, what would you say to her?
Well, this is actually a conversation I've had with a lot of girlfriends over the years. And my main advice would be that if you're going through something that just feels like there's no light at the end of the tunnel, eventually the fog does lift. And I liken it to if you're really unwell with, say, the flu, and you just think, oh, I'm never going to be able to get out of bed. And then eventually one day you can get out of bed and you don't even realize that you've got better. And I think that for any life, as I said earlier, life altering situation, eventually that fog lifts. And one day you just realize, I'm actually okay. And I've come out the other side of this better than I was when I entered it.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to understand that at the time. My husband would have when I was really sick, he would have very long sort of life coachy chats with me, like, you can do this, you can get through it. And I didn't want to hear it. I just wanted to wallow and just be like, no, this is horrible. This is not how I wanted my 40s to be. But now I come out through the other side and I'm like, actually, life's better now. And I'm a different person because of this. And so that's my advice. Eventually the fog lifts and there's always a silver lining. There is. It can be really hard to see it at the time, but it will come to you eventually. There's got to be good in every bad. There just has to be.
Yes, that's exactly right. I love that message. That's a really important message, because it's something that we probably don't hear enough, and everything is doom and gloom. But I can tell you, like, I'm almost in my mid-50s now, and I'm bloody loving this decade. And given what life experiences you've had and how you're viewing, the future, you're going to have an incredible decade ahead.
I really hope so. I'm so ready to just close the book on my 40s, that's for sure.
Mate, look out with your 50s. Your husband better strap himself in and gird his loins, because he's in for a big ride. I
I'll tell him you said that.
How can people connect with you, Kirsten? Because obviously once they hear this episode, they're going to be wanting to find more about your products.
Yep. So Bettyquette, BETTYQUETTE. That's the biggest thing, is no one knows how to spell it.
Yes.
But it's bettyquette.com.au, and we're also on Instagram at Bettyquette, and then you can find my personal account on Instagram at Kirsten & Co.
Fantastic.
Also on Facebook as well.
Great. And I'll have all of those links in the episode notes as well, the show notes, so people can have the direct links to that as well. And before we wrap up, there's one question I love to ask my guests. So if you could look into the future, what do you hope that 80-year-old Kirsten is going to say about current day Kirsten?
Oh, that's hitting me in the feels. That's getting me all thinking about when I'm 80. I hope that she thinks she's lived a good, happy, kind-hearted life. That's probably it, I think. That's what life for me comes down to, just being a good, happy, kind person.
That's lovely. Well, you're certainly a shining light now, Kirsten, so I dare say that she is going to say those words.
Let's hope. I hope I'm not a grumpy old 80-year-old. I hope I'm a happy
as long as she was nice now. That's
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, thanks so much for your time today. Thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Such a lovely chat. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.
Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today. I'd love you to hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favourite podcast app to keep spreading these empowering messages. Please share this podcast with other incredible midlife women in your world. Join me again next week for another redefining midlife conversation. Thanks again for tuning in.